you should know that by being a racing driver, you are under risk all the time. And by being a racing driver means you are racing with other people. And if you no longer go for a gap that exists, you're no longer a racing driver. Because we are competing. We are competing to win. And the main motivation to all of us is to compete for a victory. It's not to come third.
So, what if Ayrton Senna was still with us? What if he lived past May the 1st, 1994? That horrible, tragic incident that started on the Friday with Rubens Barrichello having that horrific accident. Senna visiting him in the hospital. All of the drivers thinking we need to do something about safety. You know, taking on the mantle that Jackie Stewart started. And then we have on that Saturday, Roland Ratzenberger, that a tragedy passes away after a crash in qualifying. And then, after starting on pole at the San Marino Grand Prix at Imola, it's Ayrton Senna that has a crash and eventually passes away on May the 1st, 1994. I mean, Ayrton Senna, one of the greatest of all time. You can most certainly have that argument. Down the pub, bumping into myself, if you said Ayrton Senna is the greatest of all time, it would be hard to argue. He's definitely up there in that conversation. Top 1, top 2, top 3, top 4, top 5. Absolutely. It would be very hard to argue. It would be very hard to argue. But one thing Ayrton Senna did do, he transcended Formula One. In the, before your Schumachers, especially before your Hamiltons and before your Verstappens, but in particular Lewis Hamilton, he's the one driver I think now that transcends Formula One. Anyone that watches Sport Has TV knows who Lewis Hamilton is, and Ayrton Senna did it before Hamilton. But you could make an argument that this was more, the fact, Senna, everyone knowing who Senna was more of an exclamation mark, because this was before the days of Snapchat, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, WhatsApp, social media. Were all connected, the internet, just a few clicks away. All they had in Senna's day, you got your TV, maybe it's, you've got your radio, you got your magazines, you got your telephone, your landlines hardwired to the wall. And that's pretty much about it for communication. Yet everyone knew who watched sport, who had a TV, who Ayrton Senna was. And I think, in a way, that's more amazing. So, Ayrton Senna, greatest of all time. Let's have a look at his stats, shall we? So, out of the 11 championships he entered, he won 3 of them. Out of the 161 races, he won 41 with 80 podiums out of those 161. Now, one of the biggest stats isn't there, and that's pole positions. We can make an argument that he is one of the fastest drivers on one lap of all time. 65 out of the 161 pole positions. So in terms of his wins, just over 25% of his races he won. I mean, that's not bad at all. In terms of podiums, it was nearly just shy of 50. Wins from pole was 44. I mean, this guy was dominant, wasn't he? In terms of his poles, 60, what is it, most? Yeah, poles, 65. 65 pole positions, imagine that. Absolutely breathtaking. So we're going to be asking, though, if Ayrton Senna survived that May the 1st incident, what would have happened? How many more races do you think he would have won? How many more titles? That's the big one. What would have happened with the Schumacher versus Ayrton Senna debate? Would he have gone to Ferrari? When would he retire? Would he have stayed at Williams all the time? Would he have beaten Schumacher in 94, 95? Would he have beaten the Hill in 96, 97? That would have been his main contenders. Well, let's have a gander, shall we? So 1994 happens. And let's be fair, we think here, Ayrton Senna wins that 1994 title. Now, as we know, that Williams was an absolute dog of a car when it started. It was not good at all. One of the reasons why 1993, the year Alain Prost won, that Williams was one of the most advanced cars in Formula One. Absolutely amazing. But the 94 Williams was, kind of based on the 93. But then you had this Williams car and it wasn't, it didn't have all that technology that had been taken away, that had been stripped, by the rule makers. And I think rightly so. And the car was really unbalanced and really, really hard to drive. Now, despite that, in the first race at Brazil, Ayrton Senna qualifies on pole, a 1:15.962. Michael Schumacher in second on a 1:16.290. But what's fascinating about that, Damon Hill, who does know the team better than Senna at this point, he was the test driver in 92, promoted in 93, got wins in 93, but Damon Hill nearly 1.5 seconds off Ayrton Senna's pace in the same car at Brazil. And let's be fair, yes, Senna knows Brazil like the back of his hand. But Brazil is quite a short track. You normally see, when we look now, you normally see fairly small gaps. So Ayrton Senna goes on pole position, fails to finish the race, sadly. So on we move to Ida in Japan. Once again, Ayrton Senna's on pole, a 1:10.218. Couple of tenths faster than Michael Schumacher. Hill is about half a second slower, just over half a second, in third, slower than Ayrton Senna. But once again, Ayrton Senna is definitely showing Hill the way. And this is going to be quite specific. This is quite significant, I think, for that 94. Who's going to win that 94 championship? But first corner, Senna gets taken. Senna goes out, unfortunately. Which means he didn't finish a race in the 94 season, because the next one up is the very tragic San Marino Grand Prix, which Senna starts on pole again. 3 poles in what you could make an argument for is not currently, at the time, the best car going. Williams are having problems. Adrian Newey is being really tested at this point. Schumacher starts second, about 3 tenths slower than Ayrton Senna, who does a 1:21.548. Damon Hill in fourth. This time Damon Hill is, 6, nearly 7 tenths of a second away from Ayrton Senna's fastest time. And obviously the tragedy happens. Okay, so Senna doesn't finish Imola. He's really down on the points. But here's the thing, and this is why we think here that Ayrton Senna wins the 94 title. Schumacher and Benetton did have quite a few disqualifications that year. One with the plank going past Damon Hill in pole. Would that have happened? I don't know. But the other specific thing is Damon Hill did beat Schumacher in the races. Yeah, yes, he did. But bear in mind, Ayrton Senna was, even in 1994, a better driver than Damon Hill. Just look at the pole positions. So he would have run Michael Schumacher way closer than Damon Hill did. And Damon Hill, there was just lost it by a point at that incident in Adelaide. Would it have gone down to Adelaide? Maybe. But then Benetton were getting DQ'd for plank wear, etc. down at Belgium, assuming that happens. And Ayrton Senna would have won more races than Damon Hill, which is why I think Senna wins the 94 championship. Williams ended up sorting that car out. For example, he had Japan in the wet. The original Rainmaster, Ayrton Senna, he would have, Damon Hill, an absolute, still to this day, one of the best victories in Formula One, what he had to do then. And I think Ayrton Senna does win that race. And then we're going to go into 1995, because Ayrton Senna, I think, wins that 94 title. Schumacher does give him a run for his money, but in spite almost of that really, really poor start that Ayrton Senna has to the 94 title, I still think he wins at the end. They sort that out. Benetton would have still got potentially a penalty. One of the reasons why the FIA were supposedly so harsh on Benetton was because there was all this suspicion that they were running traction control. There's stories about it now, and there was rumours that that's one of the reasons why when they could get a slap on the wrist, and more than a slap on the wrist, the FIA supposedly gave it to him. Once again, that is just rumours and conjecture though. But surely Senna wins. So on we go to 1995, where I think Senna wins again. Why? Well, with Schumacher, an absolutely amazing title, but I think that the Williams was the superior car that year. I mean, Damon Hill started really well. Reliability, the only thing I think that would have stopped Ayrton Senna in 1995 would have been the reliability of his Williams. Yes, there's potentially question marks about that, but I still think he wins, because Damon Hill had an absolute shocker of a year. Let's be honest. In 1995. David Coulthard, towards the end of 1995, ran Damon Hill really, really close, didn't he? To that point. And I think in the superior Williams, I think Damon Hill, his head was not on right all year. Remember, that was the year that Frank Williams decided Frentzen would have been better than Damon Hill, which I still think, in hindsight, was a mistake. even though no matter how, Frentzen is really good. And that's what Senna wins, because I think Williams has just the superior car, but I do think it's close. And I don't think, Johnny Herbert's up there, but because Benetton had this number 1 and number 2, I don't think Johnny Herbert would have been up there enough in the Benetton, because they didn't focus on the number 2 as much at Williams, where they do seem to be a bit fairer. And that's why Damon Hill could also help Ayrton Senna to that title if need be. There would have been, unlike David Coulthard, who was still a bit new, he would have been a lot closer to Senna than I think Herbert was to Michael Schumacher most of the time. And that's the other reason why I think in 1995 Ayrton Senna wins. So what happens in 1996? Well, I don't think assume Williams keep Damon Hill. In 1996, it's not Damon Hill. Yes, the Williams is very, very dominant. It is Ayrton Senna once again winning a 3rd championship in a row. Say Schumacher goes to Ferrari. You can make a really good argument that Senna decides to go to Ferrari instead. But say Schumacher goes to Ferrari, I don't think that Ferrari, as we know, he wasn't going to beat Damon Hill on that Ferrari. No way would he have beaten Ayrton Senna in that Ferrari. It just wasn't good enough. It was absolutely amazing and a near miracle that Schumacher did win races in that Ferrari. Who could forget Spain? He won in Italy as well, didn't he? I think Belgium as well. All very good victories. But Ayrton Senna rockets to the 1996 title. Damon Hill probably finishes second after winning a few races. Now, we come to the 97 title. Maybe Williams have Jacques Villeneuve in at this point, but I still think Ayrton Senna beats Jacques Villeneuve to that title. Why? Once again, Williams have the best car. They produced the best car again in 97. Newey's last Williams. And it was a good one. The reason why I think Ayrton Senna beats Jacques Villeneuve is, if you remember back to 97, Williams, and in particular Jacques Villeneuve, did their absolute best to try to not win the championship, making mistakes. Australia was, a bit of a mistake. Pit stop fumbles, for example, and in Silverstone, he went off in Germany, and they're things they're incidents that you wouldn't really see Ayrton Senna do in a dominant car. So I think he also wins 1997 fairly easily. I don't think it goes down to the wire. Michael Schumacher, 97 showed us why Michael Schumacher is one of the best in an inferior Ferrari, and I think it was for the most of the year. There were races where it was better. Went right down to the wire, but then unfortunately we had that Jerez incident, which I don't think would have happened if Senna was around, because I think Senna would have, if it would have gone down to the wire, it wouldn't have been this a couple of points in it. I don't think it would have been a really uphill struggle for Michael Schumacher. But then what happens at the end of 1997? I think he then retires. He's getting old. He's in his late 30s. And he's won 7 world championships at this point. Does he need to win any more? He's the most successful driver of all time if he retires in that Williams in 1997. Could he go to Ferrari? Well, Schumacher's there, but if he's not, he potentially could go to Ferrari, but I don't think he needs to. And statistically, he probably is, by this time, in that dominant Williams, the best driver, statistically as well, of all time. How different Formula One may well have looked after 1994 had Senna still been around. At least that's our thoughts. That's what we think for the 1990, from 1994 onwards. But what do other people think? This whole thing was kind of like inspired by the Reddit posts, which I think was really, really interesting. So let's have a look. Let's have a look then at these Reddit posts. What do we think? What do other people think? What if Senna survived his Imola crash? And it all started by a guy called Old History. I will put it in the descriptions below. And he said, obviously, this crash never happens. Well, first off, saying he survives, no wheel debris hitting his helmet, although he still has a hard impact in the wall of Tamburello. The wind is completely knocked out of Ayrton Senna, and he suffers a minor injury from the impact, but is alive and well. Senna wouldn't even be very upset about crashing out. He'd simply say he feels that he let Ratzenberger down by not being able to win the race for him. Many know that he had the Austrian flag was found in the car, which is, when I got that was so So sad. So F1 still rolls out their regulation changes. Senna fully adamant about it, saying he would sit out of races without the changes. Teams get the new changes rolled out for the Spanish Grand Prix, but the next race before Spain is Monaco. And he's saying, obviously, Monaco, Senna's favourite. And Senna sits out the race thanks to a minor injury. Now, Williams uses the second car in Monaco, given how Senna wasn't injured, using David Coulthard gets his debut at Monaco as a substitute. If you remember, Williams didn't field a car in Monaco. And the front two rows were blank for both Senna and Ratzenberger. So in Spain, after Montemini had another serious crash, Senna expressed how he breathed a sigh of relief when he heard that Montemini wasn't killed and only injured. He again, once, snuck into the hospital to check on him and received a small fine from the FIA, and which was later dropped. And that's one thing, as we already mentioned, that he did to Rubens Barrichello. Now, after his wreck in practice, so in the race, Senna nabs pole position with a strong 1-2, with him and Hill getting the first spots on the podium. Throughout the year, Senna challenges Schumacher for the title, but Schumacher barely wins out. That's interesting. Thanks to capitalising off, we did say this, Senna's early slump and missing out on Monaco. He goes on to say, I think Senna likely wins the 95 and 96 championships too, before beginning a small decline as he ages, likely leaves by 2000. He would become a top racing pundit in Brazil. He and Prost would remain in close contact as friends, and how lovely is that, because we saw them, I'll never forget the image on the podium in 93 Adelaide, Senna's last race win, with Prost on the podium too. Finally friends, because after that race they're no longer competitors, are they? An older Senna could possibly even help a driver for Prost racing by the end of his career, although the team would still be a backmarker and weak team. Okay, so Senna would be remembered as one of the best drivers, 5 titles, with Ty Fangier's record for third best. Schumacher now would have only 6, and now would share that with Lewis Hamilton at the time. I think of writing this, Lewis Hamilton had 6. I'd say not much else changes after Senna retires, although I bet that Senna would embrace Massa in a hug to console him on his 2008 title loss. Absolutely. Someone, Vader Simmons, has put Schumacher wins 94-95. Senna gets upset at Williams, moves to Ferrari without Schumacher. Brawn and the rest does not improve, retires after a few years. Schumacher may or may not win 96-97 with Benetton and or Williams. Someone else put, I think Senna wins in 1994 because Hill came so close. I'd put Senna a tier above Hill. Okay, yeah, I would. As for Michael, he probably goes to Williams, but we could add on your answer. Maybe he goes to McLaren and brings some of the Ferrari Benetton dream team to Ron Dennis. Someone put nonsense. Senna would join Williams for 96-97. This is timeless, nabbing both championships before pushing Mika out in 98-99 in a McLaren. Okay. He then joined Ferrari, winning all titles from 2000 to 2004, when he makes a surprise move to Renault. Oh my gosh, which turns out to be a payoff with him winning 05, 06 and 07. Sees him back to Ferrari, winning of course before to join McLaren in 08, Brawn in 09 and Mercedes in 2010. The one year he doesn't win. And well, yeah, unlikely, but optimistic. And this guy here has put a really long post, which I think is really interesting. He's put all hypothetical, but here goes. And this is FitEmu1293. He says Senna wins the 94 championship. Hill missed out, by only 1 point, and Senna was the far superior driver in that Williams. So he would have comfortably won the 94 title, even by Schumacher's own admission. Granted. He said Senna narrowly wins the 95 title. Controversial, I know, but Schumacher was capable of making mistakes under pressure, and that was against Damon Hill, he surmises. Senna would have extracted more from that Williams that Hill and Coulthard were able to do. Absolutely. Senna walked his way to the 96 title, something even Hill admitted that he probably would have done on occasions. Senna then beats his teammate Jacques Villeneuve to the 97 title, similar to us, and wins his 7th world championship. But he says now, this is where it gets a bit confusing. He says, I'm of the view that Senna would have probably retired after the 97 season, by which point he would have been 37 going on 38. Let's also say that Schumacher still goes to Ferrari, albeit not a foregone conclusion in this hypothetical version of reality. And he wins 5 consecutive championships. So what does that mean for his race wins and poles? And this is where it gets interesting, if you like his stats. He said, well, let's look at Schumacher. He won 72 Grand Prix for Ferrari, a number that stays intact, since he would not overlap Senna's career. But the 19 Benetton victories, let's be generous, if Senna lived, Schumacher, say, wins 14 of those races. Still a substantial amount, but a total of 86, and that's 5 lower than his tally. He goes on to say, now for Senna, by looking at his 60th stint as at McLaren as a blueprint, not in all, but he's saying not all of those years did Senna have a competitive car. But he says 35 wins and 45 poles in 6 seasons, equating to an average of 6 wins and 8 poles a year. Roughly. So using the law of averages, in the 4 seasons post-Imola 1994, Senna goes on to record 24 more victories, 32 more pole positions. As I said, not entirely accurate, as in this version, Senna wins the title 4 years in a row and is therefore likely to win more races than he did in some of those years in the uncompetitive McLaren. Could be more, could also maybe be less, but it gives a rough figure. Now, Senna retires with 7 titles, 65 wins and 97 pole positions. Senna would have retired statistically as the most successful racing driver of all time in terms of championships, race wins, and by extensions, podiums and poles and podiums, leaving him with a total of 162 wins and poles. Schumacher winning 5 world titles, 86 race wins and 55 poles, a drop of 13 due to Senna's qualifying dominance. A total of 141 when combined. Now, of course, I know what you're going to say, he says, but all this is guesswork. Yes, of course it is. But with this prediction, is it paint a clear picture of the GOAT debate? Greatest of all time. I mean, nobody can seriously argue that Schumacher was twice the driver Senna is, something his title haul suggests. Nobody can also argue that Schumacher was a better qualifier than Senna either. And just to play devil's advocate here, he says Lewis Hamilton is on 6 world championships, going on 7, 92 race wins and 97 poles. With years of racing still to come, he may well beat that. Well, yeah, he has, but maybe not by much as this guy thinks, writing it about 4 years ago. But he says Senna and Schumacher are 2 of the greatest F1 drivers of all time. Both were the best of their era and both inspired a generation of racers. I've always had the view that Senna was a better driver than Schumacher, and had it not been for his death at Imola, it would have been his and not Schumacher's records that he'd be currently breaking. But I guess we'll never know. And I think personally that is so significant. And let's leave the video with that line. Senna and Schumacher, 2 of the greatest of all time. Yep, difficult to argue. They did inspire a generation of racers, and I've always had a view that Senna was a better driver than Schumacher. And he said, and that had it not been for his death at Imola, it would have been Senna's and not Schumacher's records that Hamilton would currently be breaking. Thank you very much. This has been What If Ayrton Senna Had Lived. We'll speak to you soon. Thank you so much for watching.